Hi. My name is Sonia.
Hi, Sonia.
And this is Mark Woodward, and he is not from OSBI. He's from Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Substances. This is Drug Trends in Oklahoma. I will let him introduce himself, what all he does, and we'll get started.
Thank you. Yeah, I get introduced as everything from OSBI to DEA to CIA, and I wish I got their kind of money, but I don't. So, but yeah, I'm with the Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics. We're a state drug enforcement agency, and we work all over the state of Oklahoma enforcing Title 63, which are Oklahoma's drug laws. We also deal with human trafficking because the same people that are moving drugs across the border are now moving people because sadly drugs run out and they got to bring more. People never run out. They can reuse people and sell them over and over again. And so sadly, the cartels actually say today they make more money moving people than drugs, but they'll move anything for profit. They're businessmen, and they're simply supplying a demand. And that's what I kind of tell people is, look, they're just giving us what we want. And there's the problem. We've got, when people ask me, and I've been at the Bureau of Narcotics 30 years, people have asked me thousands of times, how are we going to solve the drug problem? I say, you got to get them to where they don't want to use drugs. In my 30 years of dealing with thousands of people, whether they're in prison or drug treatment or recovery programs, juvenile detention, I always ask them, different questions about this, but none of them have ever said I never wanted to do drugs. They made me do it. It'll be a choice that they're making. And sadly, our kids are making a lot of these choices because not only are they not hearing the dangers of drugs, we're minimizing the effects of drugs. We're normalizing getting high on drugs. We just have to change the name. Things like marijuana, for example. I spend a lot of time, I wear a lot of hats at the Bureau of Narcotics, but I love going into the schools and talking to kids, but I got to spend 30 minutes breaking their myths down before I can ever actually talk to them about the dangers of drugs. These kids are convinced marijuana is going to cure every problem they've ever had. I tell people I wish marijuana did half the things they said it would do. Half the people at MD Anderson Cancer Center could just go home today. But sadly, that is not happening. But the kids hear it, and I don't get into the whole marijuana is it medicine or anything, but you need to understand, even if it is medicine, much like prescription drugs, you can't talk about benefits without talking about prescription drugs being among the most deadliest drugs on the planet. And it's the same with marijuana. You can't talk about the pros of it, but without talking about there's a dark side to it. And I've spent a lot of time on that because, again, that's where it starts. Our culture kind of wants to say, well, there's marijuana and there's safe drugs, and they go in this box. Then there's some kind of dangerous drugs, and here's what we need to do with those. And then, oh my gosh, these drugs over here are pure evil. This is where we need to spend our resources. And you can't do that. You can't say that somebody you encounter high on this drug is going to behave this way. High on this drug, here's how they're going to react. And if they're high on this drug, here's how they're going to react. Every drug is different. Every person's different. When they use drugs and alcohol is going to determine how they respond. In fact, alcohol is a great example. Is everybody that drinks alcohol this fall at a Thunder basketball game going to then go home and beat up their wife and kids? No. So is it fair to say that alcohol belongs in the harmless box? No. Not everybody's going to use meth and go kill a cop, but we've lost 3 of our agents in the last 28 years by people high on meth. Some people are going to use meth and they're going to graduate Keith Harvard in the spring. But we kind of put drugs in a box, and things like marijuana is the harmless box, and we're not talking about the dark side of it. I kind of call it the Trojan horse because we only looked at the outside of it, and people said, man, I want that in my village because I hear it's going to cure cancer and it's going to bring in all these millions of dollars for our roads and schools and bridges, and it's just going to be unicorns and rainbows. And so we're only focusing on this outside facade that the people pushing it wanted us to see. I knew what was inside because I have been studying this for 30 years. Oklahoma was 22 years past the first legalization, which was California in 1996. Oklahoma didn't pass it till 2018. So we had 22 years to see, okay, what happens if we legalize it? Is everything going to get better? No. But our partners in California said, you need to fight this as long as you can. It's just an absolute nightmare. And then Colorado passed it. We started getting their data reports on everything from underage use to car accidents to just addiction rates. Because here's the problem with drugs. Your brain's going to love them. Remember I told you before, the cartels can't get drugs into our country fast enough to feed our appetite? You know why we have an appetite? Because drugs say, wow, I love this behavior. If using drugs felt like chewing on broken glass, we wouldn't even be having this breakout session. I wish using drugs felt like chewing on broken glass. But drugs say, wow, this behavior feels great. And when your brain figures out a behavior it likes, you better keep feeding it. If you don't, your brain is going to fight back. And let me tell you something, your brain does not fight fair. But that drug will own you. Because when your brain figures out what it wants, if you don't give it what it wants, you're going to start getting sick. So many people say, well, I use marijuana because I have anxiety and depression. Yes, you do. Why? Because you're not using marijuana and staying high. Because you can't stay high, you're going to come down. When you come down, you get anxiety and depression. So they are creating a cycle. And I get that if you're going, yeah, but what's the big deal? We're talking about 11 and 12-year-olds. We're not talking about your 28-year-old son who's been smoking marijuana for 10 years. We're talking about 11 and 12-year-olds in your middle school. Almost every school I go to, and the first question I ask the staff is, how long have you had the vape detectors in the bathrooms? They're like, how did you know we have vape detectors in all our bathrooms? I said, because these kids are hooked on it, whether it's the nicotine or in most cases, the THC marijuana, vape oil. See, that's the other thing. I've got so many parents who say, well, yeah, but we all smoked a little marijuana. What's the big deal? I'm like, first of all, your kids are not smoking. And when I say kids, I'm not just talking about your 11-year-old. I could be talking about your 48-year-old son who's still smoking weed. Your kids are not using what you smoked in high school 25 years ago. When we would go to places like southeastern Oklahoma, I always kind of joke, most people in the summertime, they got to go to Disneyland with their family. I went to McCurtain County because you know what they do in the summertime in McCurtain County in the 1980s and 90s. We grew some of the best marijuana in the country in eastern Oklahoma. We traced Oklahoma marijuana to 22 other states and 4 port cities. Everybody wanted our stuff. We knew how to grow good dope and play good college football in the 80s. But we were growing this good marijuana because it was hitting like 6 and 7% THC levels. That was off the chart. Most states, if you were lucky to get 3 or 4%, and that's still going to get you stoned out of your mind. The stuff they were smoking at Woodstock in '69, y'all have seen the video, right? Some of y'all may have been there. I don't know. That was typically 2 to 3% THC, and you saw how they were behaving in the rain on the hillside in Woodstock, New York. They were getting stoned out of their mind. We're talking about 7%, nearly triple by the 80s and 90s. Everybody wanted our stuff. Today, you can go across the street to a dispensary, it's 17 to 22% THC. That's the equivalent of kind of saying, you know, here in Oklahoma, we've got 3.2 beer, right? And then you go across the street to a liquor store and get 22.2. You still think that's the same liquor? But our culture says, yes, it is. It's just marijuana. It's over here in the comfortable box. Leave it alone, legalize it, tax it, give us all this money, and focus your resources on these dangerous drugs. In my 30 years of drug enforcement, I have seen this drug in this box impact more lives than any other drug. Not that they smoke it and die, because that's not going to happen. In fact, the brain's going to say, wow, I love this. And now the drug owns it. And it's going to solve their problems temporarily while they're impaired. They don't care about their back pain, their neck pain, their problems with their parents, their problems with the school issues, the issues with the bullies and the popular kids at school. It takes your problems away. That's why it's popular in the middle schools and high schools. Your brain loves it. And why is it in the bathrooms? Because again, these kids wake up, they hit a pipe, they're vaping, marijuana, or they've rolled out of bed. As soon as they get to the bus stop, they're vaping. At the back of the bus, they're vaping. In math class, they're vaping. At lunchtime, they're sneaking out into the bathrooms and vaping. As soon as they get home, they vape. And before they go to bed, they vape. Now, if we took THC oil out of that and I replaced that with alcohol and said they're drinking in the morning, drinking between classes, drinking at lunch, drinking when they get home, and drinking before they go to bed, what would you call that person?
An alcoholic.
Right, but what do we call it if they're using marijuana? He's just medicating. Leave him alone. Why has our culture done that? Because we don't want to talk negative about something that makes us uncomfortable. And we want to keep this in the comfortable box. I see it out of the box every day. And that's why I sound the warning that I do. I don't see the unicorns and the rainbows. And by the way, I go to hundreds of schools every year. I've never tripped over a pile of money from marijuana. Anyway. And I've been to the cancer centers, and these people have tried marijuana. And here's what breaks my heart. I kind of joke about it. The truth is, you get a woman today who's leaving the hospital right now, someplace in Oklahoma, who was just told she's got stage 3 breast cancer and she needs to get to the oncologist down in Houston at MD Anderson. And instead, she's going to go on Facebook when she gets home, go to one of these cannabis sites or she's going to go to a dispensary across the street and ask some 19-year-old bud tender, which strain should I use to shrink my tumor? Because I read on Facebook that marijuana shrinks tumors. She's pinning her medical hopes on a 19-year-old bud tender at a dispensary instead of going to Houston. 6 months from now, she's going to go back to her oncologist, and the oncologist is going to say, I really wish you'd gone to Houston instead of Bubba's skunk weed shop, because now you're stage 4. And don't even bother going to Houston. You need to go make peace with your family. They're pinning their medical hopes on stuff they're reading. That's what breaks my heart, because this whole marijuana group is saying marijuana cures this, it cures that, it does this, it does that, it's medicine. And here's the point. Our kids hear this, they start using it at a very early age. Their brain loves it, and now they have conditioned their brain to hate sober. You're now sick when you're sober. Now you're anxious when you're sober. Now you're depressed when you're sober. They're not using it to get high. They're using it to stop being anxious and depressed. And there's bipolar, there's schizophrenia, and we're talking about 13, 14, 15-year-old kids. And we're just scratching the surface, because it is not the marijuana from the 1980s. In fact, what your kids are using today is stronger than what they were using back in May. And what your kids are going to be vaping by Christmas is going to be a lot stronger than what they're vaping today, because it'll never be. It's just like an alcohol. You don't think an alcoholic's going to drink the same amount tonight that they were drinking back in June? They can't. Your brain keeps adjusting. You're going to need more tomorrow than you had today to get to the same point. Your tolerance keeps changing. You'll hear these drug addicts. I'll give you an example. We had a police officer got stabbed 7 years prior, got put on hydrocodone. After 7 years, he was up to 104 hydrocodone every 24 hours. Jesus. That's how high his tolerance was. That would kill you and I. If we tried 14, it'd probably kill us because our tolerance isn't strong. But do that over 7 years. Yes, it's destroying his liver and everything else. But he needed more tomorrow than he had today to get to the same point. It wasn't about getting high for him. It is about feeding the brain, because the brain is craving it, and the brain is not going to fight fair. When you've introduced something the brain likes, that now is what you will do and continue to feed to keep from being miserable. And you've got plenty of people out here who are growing some of the strongest marijuana on the planet to feed that. In Oklahoma, we've got nearly 8,400 marijuana farms, 2,200 dispensaries. They're all in competition to grow the best stuff. So again, you're talking about marijuana I can get buds out of a jar that's 17, 18, 22% THC. And what is that doing? We're going to talk about that if we're going through this. But here's why I'm sounding this alarm, because this leads to the path. As I said a minute ago, I've seen this drug in this box, marijuana, wreck more lives than any other drug. Not because they smoked it and died, because of the path to put them on. Because you go talk to the people using the drugs in this box and ask them where they started. In the thousands of people I've dealt with, one of the questions I always ask is, how did you get started on your path of addiction? I already know the answer. I want to hear them tell me. Smoking weed with my friends when I was a teenager. This guy's not going to wake up at 42 and say, you know what, I'm going to go down to Walgreens, buy some Sudafed and cook meth in my basement just to see what it's like. He has worked himself up to cooking meth in his basement in his active addiction. The 27-year-old prostitute out here on the streets who's shooting heroin and fentanyl in her neck every 3.5 hours. She didn't just wake up and say, I wonder what it's like to jam fentanyl in my neck. She's worked herself up to that point. And by the way, you know what they always have on them or in their house? Marijuana. Marijuana is their go-to drug. It's their come down until they get their drug of choice, because the marijuana by itself will not do it anymore. And when we got 11 and 12-year-olds vaping this stuff in the bathroom, by the time this kid's 14 or 15, he's already moved on to your medicine cabinets. By 18, the kid's on to fentanyl. By 22, he's shooting anything he can put in his body just to keep from being health sick. And yet we've got it over here in the harmless box, because we're only looking at the outside, that Trojan horse that we opened the gates and said we wanted in our village. It's here to stay, by the way, and it will never be enough. And now these kids who aren't even smoking anymore because they can't get high smoking, these kids, and again, kids could be adults too, they're going on to vaping and they're using bowl. Bowl is just taking this, and you got to kind of understand the language too, because oftentimes your addict, whether that's your 17-year-old or your 47-year-old son, they're going to be addicts talking their own language. They may be talking about things like wax, stab, shatter, and a parent may not have a clue what the kid's even talking about. If you don't understand the language of addiction, you're going to miss stuff right in front of you. And I always tell people, drug addiction is not going to sneak up on you. It is right in front of you. So many times, sadly, a loved one will overdose and die, and they, gosh, I had no clue. But then the family starts reviewing things in their mind, and they're going, you know what? I did start to see a change. Things were changing at work. Things were changing with their hygiene. Things started missing from the house. Suddenly their dad got worse. Suddenly you're starting to go, wow, that was in front of me the whole time. And I choose to ignore it. Why? Because it's a defense mechanism. Sometimes we hear something, smell something, see something, and we don't want to believe what we just thought we smelled or saw or heard because we don't want to follow that trail to figure out where it goes because that scares us as parents. So we wanted to say, oh, it's probably nothing. It's probably just this, probably just that. And maybe it is. But oftentimes we dismiss it until it's too late. And so sometimes the indications are right in front of a parent. And it's not until their loved one has died, their spouse, that they started to put all these pieces together and realize this puzzle was in front of me the whole time. But they call it things like wax because it kind of looks like earwax, and they'll just take it like what they call a nail. That's this metal piece here. They'll scoop a little of that wax. Again, they buy it at dispensaries, buy it on the dark web, put it in here, hit it with their butane torch, get it boiling hot, and then they inhale the vapors. They're vaping. And so understanding things like what a nail is. You're doing your teenagers' laundry sometime. You pick up their jeans and a piece of metal falls out. What's the problem with that? The problem is you're doing your teenagers' laundry. Stop it. The second of all, pick it up. Don't just say, oh, that's probably nothing. You probably pick that up at a construction site. It looks like an old piece of metal. No. That's one of the clues that we love to dismiss, that it must be something different. You want to find out what the answer is? Stop hiding from those signs. It's like playing poker. Now it's time to play poker with your loved ones. You show that piece of metal to them. Don't even say anything. Just show it to them and watch their body language. A poker player wins or loses a hand without ever even opening their mouth, without even knowing what the other player has, because they can read their language. I can tell if I've already beaten somebody and I've got them on the ropes because I'm watching their body language. Your son backing up? Does he start stuttering? Is he stammering? Does he change his inflection in his voice? Does he start getting defensive? Those are things right out of the addict's playbook of turning it back on you, things like that. So again, just confront it. Say, what was this that I found? And then listen to their inflection. You can tell if your son or your spouse is making something up. You played poker with them, so to speak, long enough to know when something sounds normal or this is not normal. Now you've got them. So oftentimes drug addiction is not about what they're doing or what they have, but what is their behavior around a seemingly harmless question, activity, product. If they're acting strange around it, that's a red flag that you don't want to dismiss. Follow those trails of breadcrumbs, see where it goes, because you'd much rather intervene early on than wait till it's too late. You're planning a funeral. Things like 710, if you found that, a street sign in your kid's room or a mile marker sign in your teenager's room that was 710, would you know what that meant? Most parents don't. 710 is just oil inverted. These kids aren't going to text their friends and go, hey, do you have some THC marijuana vapor oil? He may just text 710. His friends know exactly what he means. He wants to get high. He wants to vape. He needs something. So again, looking at this, that apartment's one that blew up because you can make your own vape oil from marijuana if you watch a YouTube video, but it's very dangerous. But some of them cook it themselves. And even that is not enough. And some of that vape oil can be, I already told you, you can get buds from marijuana plants at a dispensary that are as high as 22, 23%. Once you take the fats, lipids, and terpenes out and turn it into a pure concentrate, 35, 85, 95% THC. Yet we still have it over here in the harmless box. I've legalized it, it's medicine, leave me alone. Let me do what I want. And this stuff is hundreds of times stronger than anything you smoked in high school. And that's still not enough because now they're going to get a tolerance even using that over time. And they move on to the next generation. And there's tons of new products showing up all the time. Things like THCA, THCO, THCP, THCO acetate. Basically, it's marijuana on steroids. I'll give you an idea how powerful these diamonds are. I've got a guy I've known for years. He's a big pro marijuana guy. And he and I don't get along very well because his ideas are way out there. But he called me not long ago and he said, Mark, there's even a line in the sand that I will not cross. He said, I go out to Vegas and compete in these competitions where we have dab bowls. He said, we'll take a dab and a vape and hit it. And if we're both still standing, they up the strength, and we keep doing this head to head until one of us passes out.
Wow.
And I guess you can bet on anything in Vegas, right? Dab bowls. It's like a boxing match, but they're dabbing. He said, I usually win these competitions. He said, I'm only 26. He said, that scared him, that his tolerance is that high. But he said, after one of our recent contests, I went to upstairs to party with some of the competitors in a hotel room. And he said, they asked me, have you ever tried diamonds? And he said, no. And he said, they handed me a glass, looked like a meth pipe, and had this yellowish rock in it. And they said, just hit it with your torch. And he hit it with his torch. And they said the next thing he remembers, they were waking him up. He was having seizures on the couch in the hotel room. This is a guy whose tolerance is so high, he wins these competitions. And he could not take what diamonds would do. And he said, Mark, you need to understand, diamonds are becoming more and more mainstream as more and more kids, teenagers, 20-somethings, become tolerant to traditional marijuana. And it will never be enough. It's no longer about your anxiety or whatever excuse you want to use for why you use marijuana. Now you're using it because your body is going to get sick. And it's not about the medical issue, it is about the withdrawals because your brain is going to crave marijuana. And it's very troubling because these diamonds and even regular marijuana can do this. It can create a condition in the brain called marijuana psychosis. So many people say, yeah, it's just a harmless drug. They just, it's over here in this box for a reason. If they're high on it, what's the worst thing that can happen? They eat some Pop-Tarts and watch cartoons and get goofy in their mom's basement. That was the Cheech and Chong image of marijuana 50 years ago that is still around today. We still, as a culture, want to say it's the funny drug, you eat Funyuns and just have a good time. And some people do. Okay. I don't paint with a broad brush that if you smoke marijuana, you're going to go do something stupid any more than I say, if you go drink beer tonight, you're going to go home and beat up your wife and kids. Because that may not happen. But is it fair to say that people who drink marijuana do not go home and beat up their wife and kids? No. Some people have a good time. They get a little goofy at a Thunder game. Drinking some and watch this basketball, get a little laid back. Some people get kind of funny at a frat party, and then some people drink that same drug, alcohol, and go home and beat up their wife and kid. You can't paint with a broad brush that this drug does this, these drugs do this, and these drugs do this. But that's what our culture has done with marijuana. We've normalized it, and our kids are listening. And our kids are the ones that we're going to be dealing with. I've been at the Bureau of Narcotics 30 years. I'm now dealing with second and even third generations. We arrested his grandfather, we arrested his father, now we're kicking in his front door and arresting him for doing the exact same thing because they see it as normal. This is a parking lot in the Crest grocery store in Edmond. Mother's pushing her little baby in the car seat in a grocery cart. This 17-year-old kid comes up to her, grabs the baby and the car seat, pulls it out of the shopping cart, slams it into the concrete. And this is mom taking care of the baby. The baby's fine. Thankfully for the car seat. He keeps walking, and here he is now bending over a parking lot sign like it's a soda straw. Edmond police are called. They think this kid's got to be high on PCP. He is not responding to non-lethal force. He has the pain paralysis. He's fighting, hallucinating. But when they drew his blood, finally got him under control. The only drug in his system was marijuana. But our culture says, no, marijuana doesn't do that. The only drug that'll do that are these dangerous drugs over in this box. Stop talking so mean and demonizing our precious marijuana. I don't get Christmas cards from marijuana users. They do not like me talking negative about what's in that box, but it's what I deal with every day. Underneath it, you see shots fired, shots fired. And again, I don't paint with broad brush. Some of my best friends use marijuana. But again, we can't just paint with a broad brush that it's harmless for everybody. This is another 17-year-old kid and his girlfriend stole some of his uncle's marijuana. They go start after school one day, then they go out and start walking down the neighborhood street. They're in a normal Edmond neighborhood. Suddenly the kid, for no reason at all, starts ripping his clothes off and sprints to his neighbor's house, kicks in the front door and starts beating up the neighbor. Edmond police are called. They get into the living room. This 17-year-old kid now starts beating up the two Edmond officers. Doesn't respond to non-lethal force, has the pain paralysis, doesn't feel anything. He ended up being shot and killed. They're convinced this kid was high on PCP because these officers have seen PCP before. They tested his blood, the girlfriend's blood, the bag of marijuana, no PCP. I talked to the neuropsychologist who testified at that trial for those two Edmond officers. He said, all I do right now is go all over the country testifying about what marijuana psychosis is. It doesn't happen every time. It doesn't happen by any explained reason. It could be the first time, the 50th time, the 5,000th time. But two things that are common is developing brains and high-grade frequent marijuana use. So you're talking about 14 to about 26-year-olds who are frequent marijuana users will have these psychotic breaks. This guy snapped leather restraints from Oklahoma City police, and when he was being hauled into the ER to be checked out, punched 2 nurses in the face. You know what it takes to snap leather restraints? You're also going to snap and break your wrist. He didn't feel it. A high-profile case of this happened a couple of years ago out in California. This girl and her dog, sweet girl, she's a vet tech, goes to her boyfriend's apartment. He's a good guy. He's got a dog, so they got a lot in common. They're boyfriend, girlfriend dating. They're having a good time. They use marijuana that night like they've done a few times before. And the next thing she remembers, she wakes up in the hospital. She asked the nurse what happened. The nurse said, "You need to be prepared for this. You took a kitchen knife. You stabbed your boyfriend 108 times. Then you took the butcher knife and you stabbed your dog and destroyed that dog. And then you started stabbing yourself in the face and neck 43 times. It took 9 blows from an officer with a baton that ended up breaking her arms before she dropped the baton. She didn't feel any of it. She was tased 4 times, it did nothing to her. And she had used marijuana a few times before. So had the boyfriend. Nothing unusual about this marijuana they were using. He didn't snap, but she had the marijuana psychotic break. It doesn't happen every time. But again, we've got to stop painting with a broad brush. This is the harmless drug because this is the path. If they're using marijuana now, it will never be enough. That is society we're dealing with. And we're seeing this more and more, again, from young users who use high-grade marijuana, the cannabinoid hypermesis syndrome. Basically, it's very severe stomach irritation, cramps, and nausea. And oftentimes it's 16, 17, 18, 19-year-old kids. And they're showing up more and more at the doctor today with these horrific stomach pain cramps. And 2 things cures this. 1, take a hot shower, and 2, stop using marijuana. This is what high-grade marijuana will do today. It will absolutely irritate the stomach to the point where it will make them very sick. And of course, in our culture today, a lot of these companies are making it easy for kids and adults to hide their drug use in plain sight. They've got vape pens today, for example, that look like ink pens. These kids will pull that out of their jacket pocket while the teacher's got her back turned, hit the oven, slip it back into his jacket. He's texting his friends going, "I am totally baked in history class." And his girlfriend texts back, "I'm totally wasted in algebra." And there's no cloud of smoke. It's not Cheech and Chong. There's nothing being burned. And they're not taking these big inhale and exhale where there's a big cloud like she's doing. She's kind of exaggerating that. You can take a small hit in, a small exhale. There's no smell, no cloud of smoke. You're not going to walk down the hall, knock on your teenager's door, and out comes this rolling Cheech and Chong smoke like you would see 25 years ago. With vape, there's nothing being burned. There's no smell. And they can hide it in plain sight. There's hundreds of products, thousands probably, that are actually vape products that look like legitimate products. So again, what is their behavior around a seemingly harmless product or activity or question? Things like vape hoodies. That's actually a vape in the drawstring. The actual vape itself is in the pocket. So again, your kid lets you do their laundry, stop doing that. But he never lets you wash that one particular thing, start asking questions. Apple Watches that work just like an Apple Watch, but it's actually a vape. So again, take a second, third look at something that should be harmless and what is their behavior around it. And of course, we do a terrible job of educating the public about the dangers of vaping because there's this mentality that it must be safer than smoking because smoking is all that tar and nicotine and horrible stuff on your lungs. Well, you're talking about charcoals and metals and things like vitamin E that you're coating your lungs when you vape. We're seeing a lot of these lung diseases that are growing more and more common among our about 14 to 34-year-olds who are frequent vape users from the stuff that's in the vape, including one of the things that keeps the vape oil, the marijuana oil, from crystallizing and looking like that rock I showed you. Remember the diamond? To keep that from hardening and keeping it a liquid thing, vape it is vitamin E. And vitamin E will just coat your lungs like Vaseline. Your body can't extract it. It's making these kids very sick. Our country has outlawed the use of vitamin E as a cutting agent. But guess where a lot of our kids are getting their products like this? They're not getting it across the street at a dispensary. They're getting it clicking on their phone off the dark web. And overseas dark web companies don't care about U.S. laws. So they're still using vitamin E, and kids are still getting very sick from it. And again, anything that comes in a liquid jar, bottle, can, if it's a food, liquid, they can put it in a candy form with THC infusion and make it look like a real product. Now, these kids aren't going to be dumb enough to bring it to work or school in the cannabis bottle. They'll already moved it into a Gatorade or a Powerade bottle. So if you go in your kid's room, for example, and there's a Gatorade bottle or Powerade on the nightstand, that's one thing. If you find it back in the back of the sock drawer or underneath the bed, or I talk to school teachers when you got a kid who's kind of sneaking around taking a drink, why would a kid do that if it's really Gatorade or Powerade? So again, what is their behavior around a seemingly harmless product? That's your red flag. They'll move it out of these Stony Patch dark web packages of THC infused candy, and they'll bring it to school in the Sour Patch. Nerds rope. They'll have the California, but that California marijuana warning label is not real. It is fake. The overseas black market produces those because in the U.S. you cannot make a product that would be appealing to kids or be a knockoff of an existing product. So these clearly are both, and so these would be illegal. But again, the over the seas producers of these THC infused products don't care about U.S. laws. And so it makes it easy for these kids to bring it to school. And unless you're paying attention to that little label, it looks like your kid is just eating a Nerds rope. You got to look real carefully. And they may already put it in a regular candy pack. But what is this stuff doing? Again, this harmless box over here that we want to say, leave them alone. Why are you being so mean to them? Well, I'm not, but I deal with the consequences of it. This is from the Poison Control Center, and I didn't update this because it's just basically the same. I stopped adding to it, but here's 2018 when we legalized marijuana in Oklahoma. And don't think it's just little kids who are overdosing from edibles. Yes, there's a bunch. That's the 0 to 5-year-olds. That's the blue. But look at the 6 to 19-year-olds is the orange, and this is over 20 years old. So again, edibles are impacting everybody, but yet our culture says, no, this is a harmless drug that's actually medicine. It will help you. This stuff put 2 kids in OU Medical Center and nearly killed them both. 2 brothers. I believe one was 4, and the other one was like 14 months. The dad left these THC infused chips on the bed while he went to a concert downtown Oklahoma City, left the kids with the grandmother in the hotel room. She's high on drugs, so they wasn't paying attention that the kids were eating it. And again, these are illegal because you can't mimic a legitimate product. But you know these are made overseas because they don't care about Frito-Lay's lawyers tracking them down and suing them for using the same label. But this would allow your teenager to appear at least in his bedroom or in math class to be eating Doritos. Unless you notice, and again, he probably will bring it to school in a regular Doritos package. He'll take it out. But again, what's their behavior around it? Are they, if it's truly a chocolate chip cookie, kid will eat that in 2 bites, right? We know our teenagers. What is your teenager doing? He's breaking off little pieces. That cookie in his bedroom has lasted 2 weeks. Okay? You got a teenager who's got a cookie in their room that so far has lasted 2 weeks. You need to have that cookie analyzed, okay? Or he's just breaking off little pieces at school. I tell this the teachers, if you see a kid giving small pieces to his friends, they're not going to do that. If it's truly a harmless product, what is their behavior? And in Oklahoma, just as of this morning, there's 354,000 Oklahomans with a marijuana card. That's almost 10%, almost 10% of our population. In California, only 2.4% of their population has one, and in Colorado, only 2.7%. Nearly 10% of Oklahomans got sick in 2018. Some of you will get that here in a little bit. But the problem is, with all the marijuana we've got, the people with a patient card, you can grow your own plants. So these kids don't even have to hunt around and sneak around to get marijuana. They get it right out of their parents' house. And we're seeing more and more of those kids ending up in the hospital. And sad thing is, and it goes back to like the lady who was diagnosed with breast cancer and going to the bud tender. The industry itself does not know what marijuana will do. Okay? At the end of the day, the industry does not know what marijuana will actually do to you. Will it make you feel better? Yeah, because you're high. I can tell you right now, you're going to feel great if you all go right now and inject heroin into your arm. You're going to feel great. Is that now medicine? Are you now medicating in this room? No. Have y'all ever picked up your medicine at the pharmacy and you look on the brown label and it says, we don't know what your product will do, just try one and wait an hour?
No.
And you can be in a powder form too. We got kids, you'll see a kid being on a skateboard park, taking a hit from his inhaler. He's probably got asthma. He may have asthma, but he may also be medicated using marijuana powder. Yes, those are available on the dark web as well. And again, it goes back to what this stuff is doing to our culture. I'm a public safety guy, just like prescription drugs. Even if prescription drugs have medical value, you cannot talk about the medical benefits without talking about how dangerous prescription drugs can be when taken for the wrong reasons. This is 6 to 19-year-old. These are actual poison exposures. These are 20-plus-year-olds. And again, we legalized it in 18, so you can see what's happened. The only thing that's changed in Oklahoma. And your kids are going to say it's not addictive. I'm telling you, I've had people who got off of fentanyl, crack, and heroin who say I cannot stop smoking weed. It has that kind of a hold on them. When you got NFL football players who are throwing away $40 million and getting kicked out of the NFL because they're flunking the test, the drug test, and the only drug in their system is marijuana, that drug owns them. They would, if you gave them 2 tables. This has got weed on it. This one's got $40 million cash. Essentially, what these kids are doing is they're going to this table. This marijuana is more important to them. When you are smoking marijuana and flunking the NFL, we had an Oklahoma City NBA player a few years ago who got kicked out of the league for substance abuse, and marijuana was the drug. But again, it's very addictive too. When people are going to say marijuana is not addictive, you need to talk to the people that are in treatment. Alcohol, the most abused drug on the planet. Look at that compared to marijuana treatment. That's in Oklahoma. You know how we're 50th in education, but at least we're number 3 in teen marijuana use. We got something to brag about. 50th in education, number 3 in teen marijuana use. That's higher than California and Colorado. These so-called hippie liberal states that we never want to be like them. Here's Colorado.
Yeah, I'm a hippie liberal.
And some of my best friends are hippie liberal. There's Oklahoma. We didn't put those T-shirts at the truck stop. Welcome to Oklahoma, 3rd in the country.
Yeah.
But it's because your brain's going to love it. As I said earlier, I wish using drugs felt like chewing on broken glass. If using drugs felt like chewing on broken glass, we wouldn't be here today. But drugs release that neat chemical that God gave us called dopamine that says, wow, I love this behavior. And when the brain says, I love this behavior, another part of the brain says, well, then let's make sure you never forget what it was that gave you the source of the pleasure. And it leaves this little secondary chemical called glutamate back to the center of your brain, so you will never forget what it was that your brain loves. It's kind of like chocolate cake. Think of it this way. You're a little kid and you walk into the kitchen, there's chocolate cake, and you try it, and your brain says, wow, I love that. 20 years later, you're not going to walk into grandma's kitchen and see chocolate cake and go, I wonder if that's any good. No, your brain's already going, what are you waiting on, dude? Grab it. Your brain's already got it. Why? Because your brain flipped on a switch. And here's another secret they don't tell our kids. Again, kids could be your 17-year-old, your 57-year-old. You can never turn that switch off. When your 11-year-old figures out they love marijuana, that switch is on and you will not turn that off. Drug addicts don't go to treatment to turn that switch off. Drug addicts go to treatment to learn how to live with that flipped on the rest of their life. You'll hear the story of Bob, the alcoholic, and he goes to an AA meeting and he says, hi, my name's Bob and I'm an alcoholic. And everybody goes, hi, Bob. And they'll say, hey, Bob, when was your last drink? I was September 25th, 1985. Oh, that was 40 years ago. Bob's not cured. Bob still wakes up every day wanting a beer. Bob still shakes sometimes, pushing his grocery cart in front of that beer cooler at the store, listening to that little voice in his head that says, come on, Bob, it's just a 6-pack. Every day, an addict in recovery denies that craving is a victory for an addict in recovery, but it is a day, by hour, by minute, because that switch never comes on. Now, does the switch go on with everybody? No. There's some people who try marijuana, they don't like it. There's some people who have surgery, they're on prescription painkillers, they don't become an addict. The switch never went on, they never got the pleasure. Some people try alcohol, and they're like, hey, yeah, they don't become an alcoholic. They can take it or leave it. But when the brain figures out a behavior it likes, and there's a lot of things that
Not typhoid.
yeah. These are what our trends are today. What is a trend among our teenagers? Anything really stupid. Things we know about our kids, okay? They're 9 feet tall and bulletproof, and they already know everything, and we're wasting their time. In fact, the more dangerous it gives them energy, lightheaded, dizzy, hallucinate, or risky it is, the more they want to try it. You'll see these, there's thousands of videos uploaded every day on YouTube of kids doing really stupid things. It's not about dying. They don't care about dying. Now, which is sad, because when you tell a kid this behavior will kill them and they say so, that's sad. They're thinking of entertainment and 30-minute of increments in their life of getting acceptance and approval from their friends. That's what they're after. You'll see a kid on the second story roof of a house in a shopping cart, and his friends are getting ready to push him off. And his friends are on the roof, some of them are in the front yard, even he's in the shopping cart, they all got their phones going. And the last thing this kid says is, I'm ready. Everybody got their phones recording because if I die, I want to make sure this is uploaded.
Oh my God.
He doesn't care about dying when he hits that front yard 2 stories down. He's worried about, I'm going to make an impression with my friend. I'm going to leave a legacy, right? I'm going to impress my friends, right? That's what he's living for. Plus, here's another thing this kid knows in the back of his mind. Even if he goes off this roof in that shopping cart, somebody's going to catch him. Now, not literally, figuratively. He's going to hit that grass. He's going to break probably his collarbone, knock 9 teeth out, broke the leg, 10 ribs, and his knee. But what's going to happen? Somebody's going to call 911, and this little square box shows up with 2 guys with a gurney. They put him on it. They drive him to this big building with guys in white lab coats who put all that back together, send him home to his parents, who get a lawyer, who go to court, or who threaten to sue the store for allowing my son to steal a shopping cart. The store says we don't want to fight it. They give my parents a $300,000 check. What did I just do as a parent? I made my kid's bad decision go away. And I got wealthy over it. We are great as a culture today of making our kids' bad decisions go away. Now, again, your kid could be your 17-year-old or your 57-year-old son who's already had 7 previous DUIs. And when he calls his 78-year-old mother and father and says, I got arrested again, what do? In the middle of the night, get their pajamas on, race down to the jail, bail him out, go to court at 9 a.m. the next morning, pay that court cost to get that reduced to another suspended, and they get him another car. Because this one's crashed into a tree, and he's got to have a car, right? Because he's got to find a job. He's been looking for 24 years. He's crashed 5 previous cars that dad keeps replacing. He doesn't have a home to go to because his wife kicked him out years ago. So mom and dad brought him in. They pay his bills. They do everything. What do the parents keep doing? They keep catching their kids. That safety net. When I talk to addicts in recovery, you ask them, what was it that kept you in your addiction for so long? The number one answer is, I never had to change my behavior. Think about that. When there's no consequences for your choice, what is your motivation to stop that behavior? 0. And sadly, in our culture, it's not just drug addicts. I mean, it's all kinds of criminals who get suspended and deferred, and they're back out again. There is no motivation for them to stop their bad behavior because somebody's going to make my bad behavior go away because it's not my fault. Society failed me, my parents failed me, my parents got a divorce, blah, blah, blah. I'm bad and I make horrible decisions, but it's because of them. And that's right out of an addict and bad behavior playbook. Nothing is my fault in our culture today. It's somebody else's fault, and they're going to pay. Like that store that paid me, my family, for that grocery cart that I shouldn't have been allowed to steal. The kid that falls and breaks into the school, falls through the skylight, and his parents sue the school district, and the kid's family gets a $500,000 check because their kid broke into the school, snapped a fence, climbed on the roof, and fell through the skylight of the school in the middle of the night. And the kid gets a $500,000 check. I love our culture today. I'm not responsible for anything I do. And it's tough enough keeping up with the street drugs, but every day there's new things popping up. And what's sad is we won't know about the newest thing until one of these kids ends up dead. That's how we find out about a new drug problem, or at least in the hospital. Things like 2CI, 2CE, or Smiles, that's a kind of a synthetic methamphetamine and ecstasy combination that's being sold on the streets as ecstasy or Molly. It's not. Paint cocaine or 2C, which is kind of a mixture of 2C. It's not cocaine, but when a Latin singer down in Miami overdoses from it, suddenly it becomes the biggest, most popular drug a couple of years ago. Everybody wanted it, and this was causing more overdoses. It's not cocaine. It's mostly ketamine and pseudoephedrine. Plus, there was alcohol and a whole bunch of pills and other things in this guy's system. DMT or dimethyltryptamine is an old hippie drug from the 60s that kind of died off. It's kind of a marijuana LSD mixture, but because now it can be made in a vape form, guess what? It's popular with our kids again because it can be vaped. And so DMT is coming back. And then, of course, you got stores selling kratom. They have for years. But other companies have now taken kratom and the 7-OH and the ingredient and synthesized it to make it like 30 times stronger. And now all the kids are like, wink, wink, go to the gas station, get kratom because you're going to get as high as any drug I've ever had. And it's all legal because they say, oh, it's just kratom. It's all natural. Same with things like THC and CBD and CBN. these products that they're selling, but they're saying, oh, it's hemp. It's not actual marijuana. No, it doesn't become marijuana until you heat it up. Well, what's a kid planning to do with any of these types of products? So yes, technically sitting on a gas station shelves, it's just THCA or Delta 8. But once this kid lights it, it becomes not CBD or hemp anymore. It's now higher than marijuana. So we're really struggling with these lawyers and companies who are skirting our laws and allowing our kids to get high. And again, it's sad because we won't know about it until one of these kids dies from it. We saw this down in Kanawha a few years ago. A couple of kids died from something one of their friends bought on the internet. It was advertised as legal liquid ecstasy. I don't know what that's. Well, ours didn't do that. Back screens going silly on us. I bought this stuff on the internet, legal liquid ecstasy, mixes it together, takes it to a party in Kanawha, 31 kids at the party, 2 of them and drank it and died. 2 19-year-old kids. All 30 kids drank it, 31 kids at the party. How come only 2 died? As I said, everybody's different. The drug is different. When you use it makes a difference. You can't say that these drugs cause this, these drugs cause that, and these drugs cause that. Something called bromo dragonfly. We've never heard of it. We haven't seen it since. But we're never going to know about the next biggest thing. And that big area window for kids to get in trouble is not Friday and Saturday necessarily at a party. Oftentimes it's 3 to 6 in the afternoon, Monday through Friday, because that's when they're out of school. Mom and dad aren't home yet, and they're on the home internet and the computer figuring out how to get high from the next biggest thing from the YouTube videos, or they're going to your medicine cabinets and eating everything in there. The number one place drug addicts get their drugs is out of their own home. And, most of us will never have cocaine, meth, or heroin in our house, but any one of us could fall down a flight of stairs and you're going to leave the hospital tonight with some of the most powerful, deadliest drugs on the planet. And we're keeping them in unlocked medicine cabinets and unlocked purses for your teenagers and their friends or your loved one or your spouse to go and overdose and die from. As I said, we had a police officer who started on 4 a day. By the time 7 years later, he's up to 104 a day. They'll take him out of medicine cabinets and friends. Safeguard this stuff if you need it. If you don't, get rid of it. We've got over 200 drug disposal boxes in every law enforcement lobby in Oklahoma, sheriff's department, police department. And keep an eye on your loved ones. We don't want anybody to be in pain, but your body starts to heal and suddenly it's not about the pain in your knee, it's about the pleasure in your head. And thankfully, we don't prescribe the way we did 20 years ago. 20 years ago, if I fell down a flight of stairs, I'm leaving the hospital with a 30-day supply and 5 refills. And they couldn't figure out why the whole country's hooked on opioids. Now you cannot leave the hospital with more than a 7-day supply. And even after 3 to 4 days after major like chest cracking surgery, you're probably on the 4th day going to switch over to ibuprofen and acetaminophen with occasional opioid thrown in because we're understanding pain so much better. Your body is amazing at healing. That's why I said not everybody does the switch come on. How come? Because they don't notice the pleasure. Pain's a neat thing. It tells us, 1, something's wrong. Number 2, it keeps your brain from figuring out you're going to love this drug because you're in so much back pain or knee pain. Now, if you have chronic pain, you can be on months or a lifetime of pain meds. Most of them don't get addicted because, again, they're in so much pain because of bone cancer or other issues that they never notice the pleasure. They would be thrilled to have pleasure. They're just happy to ease the pain for a little bit. So that's why some people take a swimming pool full of drugs and they never become addicted. But if your pills start missing, start finding things like burnt aluminum foil where they push pills. They'll heat it up with a cigarette lighter and push it with a straw and inhale the vapors. Things start missing around your house. Keep an eye on that. If your loved one starts missing work, lying, cheating, stealing, they'll have all the behavior of a street addict or an alcoholic. But because it came after a trauma, oftentimes we give them a pass because they're trying to convince you they're still in pain, and maybe they are. But there's other ways to get around it. But watch your medicine cabinet. And since we don't prescribe the way we used to, the criminals started stepping up about 15 years ago and saying, hey, how about we capitalize on this opioid crisis? So they started putting more fentanyl on the streets, not pharmaceutical fentanyl. We're talking about black market Chinese fentanyl that would be mass produced, incredibly cheap, shipped to the cartels who put it in heroin. They started pressing it to look like Oxy, all kinds of stuff. And people on the streets have no clue that they're actually getting fentanyl. They're not even getting the heroin. Not that that's safe. But if you do it right, the fentanyl can be the same strength as Oxy or heroin, and that's why they don't know the difference. But if you're not careful, it can be 100 to 1,000 times stronger. Things like thiofentanyl, sufentanil, omefentanil, and remafentanil. And again, side by side, you can't always tell. And sadly, these kids often don't know. We respond to a lot of overdoses to try to figure out the source of the overdose. And usually you look at the 17-year-old girl's phone, you can figure out that she got this pill from her boyfriend 2 hours ago. Dad found her dead in her bedroom and she only took a quarter of the pill. For somebody with a low tolerance, even a quarter of a scored pill, 1/4 could be fatal for a 17-year-old kid. And now you're arresting her boyfriend because he supplied it. But you can't tell the difference. Xanax, Tylenol, this is ecstasy. And again, this is something that could target our teenagers because a lot of kids aren't going to be using heroin. But a lot of kids at a club tonight, it's Friday night, could be at a club and somebody gives them a Mitsubishi or a Calvin Klein stamped pill and say it's ecstasy or Molly. Boom, they have no clue it's actually fentanyl. They have no idea. So we always impress on people, keep Narcan around because you don't know whether it's going to be your 17-year-old daughter that you find in your bedroom. Or if you take care of your elderly parents and you got a 78-year-old father who forgot he took his medicine, now he looks like he's overdosing on his pills. It could be your neighbor pounding on your door at 3 a.m. And they're saying, I think my daughter's dying. Do you have any Narcan? So I keep some at home. I keep some in the trunk of my car. I keep some in my office. The sad thing is that we're getting into Narcan resistant drugs because what the criminals are doing is they're basically giving the addicts what they want. So they're putting things in it to ease the dope sick, because dope sick can include vomiting, diarrhea, fever, cramps, shakes, suicidal pain, and depression. These people are not out on the streets using drugs to feel good. They're using it to keep from being so sick. And so they started putting things in the fentanyl, like xylazine, which is an animal tranquilizer. It sedates horses. You can imagine if it'll sedate a 2,000-pound horse, what's it going to do to a 70-pound girl on the streets of Oklahoma City or Lawton tonight? It'll absolutely lock them up. And you see these pictures of people who are just bent over and they look frozen. That's complete sedation caused by the xylazine. And it's black market xylazine. Again, they're not stealing it from farmers. They're getting it from China. And the criminals put it in these pills that look just like the oxy that they've been taking for 7 or 8 years. The other sad thing is there's these oxy pills. People used to have a heroin addiction that would be $600 to $1,000 a day. These are $2 a piece. You might need 5 or 6 a day. So you're talking about a $12 a day habit. But for the criminals, it's only about 7/100th of a penny to make that pill. So at $2 a piece, you can see how they're making billions of dollars off our opioid crisis. But again, they're giving them what they want by putting things in it that will not only feed their addiction, which is the fentanyl, but the xylazine will take their pain away and ease some of the come down of withdrawals. The problem is it wants to come out in sores and abscesses, so xylazine will start causing these infections, and 19-year-old kids are losing arms and legs. And we're seeing the xylazine overdoses and the xylazine scarring and amputations more and more all across the United States. Not in Oklahoma to the degree they're seeing on the East Coast, but it's coming. Because they're not going to make separate fentanyl for the East Coast versus here. So fentanyl with xylazine, they're also adding nitazines, which is an opioid. So, and again, the Narcan may not work because xylazine is not an opioid. That's why they're cutting it, and it's oftentimes about 24-to-1 ratio. So there's very little fentanyl in these pills. The nitazines are an opioid, but they're so much stronger that most people, if you run across somebody overdosing from a drug that's been cut with nitazines, you're not going to have enough Narcan to bring him back. Because if it took 2 to bring one guy back, if I got high on enonitazine, protonitazine, isotretinoin, it may take 6, 7, and most people don't have that many doses with it. So again, we're getting into some Narcan-resistant drugs. And medetomidine is another drug that's showing up. It's very, very similar to xylazine that they're cutting. They're cutting drugs with all kinds of things that will make Narcan not effective. But our number one killer continues to be meth. It just doesn't get the attention of some of the other drugs because there's not meth labs so much as it's coming across the border now. But we're seeing tons and tons of meth still impacting, especially rural Oklahoma. They're bringing it across the border in liquids and then they crystallize it. People have asked me about the TV show Breaking Bad, and they're like, "Is that really true that there's such a thing as blue meth?" I'm like, "No, but you can color it blue." And sure enough, we did find some blue meth one time. This is kind of interesting. It says, "Daddy, I love you, miss you. Hope you like my picture." And on the other side of the paper, it's his daughter and the doggy and son. Isn't that cute? Little 4-year-old girl drew that. That was a letter that was sent to her dad. Her dad was in the Pontotoc County Jail. Guess what that blue ink is?
Oh, wow.
That's how mom smuggled the meth into her husband, is using the 4-year-old girl. Yeah. But again, it's because of what's going on here. These people are desperate. And here's why I don't get Christmas cards from drug users. A lot of them are partying. They feel great. And they're like, "Mark, why are you spoiling my fun?" Because I know where you're going. You can't keep using this and you get to the same spot. Every time you get high, you're burning up dopamine. Over time, you're going to run out of dopamine, but you're still going to use it because now you're using drugs to keep from being so sick. the dope sick. That's why there's so much crime and violence associated with drug use. They get desperate. It drives me crazy when these people say it's a victimless crime. You'll see it on the news tonight, family of four found shot to death in their home. And it's not so they can go take that money and go pay their phone bill. They're gonna pawn whatever they stole out of that house for $20 to go buy a rock. And that's what breaks my heart. I also sit on the State Drug Endangered Children Advisory Board. I'm tired of seeing dead kids in the homes of adults who said that this is my life, my home, my body, and I don't want the cops and the government telling me what I can and cannot do. 72% of these homes have kids under the age of 12 in there. You go tell these little kids, nobody has the right to get high on drugs and put other people at risk. I've been in too many of these filthy houses, have no running water, no electricity. There's no dad around. Mom hasn't been home in 3 days. And the 11-year-old is raising the 7-year-old, the 5-year-old, and the 13-month-old baby. The 11-year-old is now the adult in the house with no running water or food. And people say, leave alone, legalize it. Legalizing drugs does not change the behavior of somebody high on drugs. And again, I've seen so many of these dead kids and these headlines. To say I should have the right to do what I want. These people were cooking boyfriend, girlfriend in an RV in the backyard, caught fire instead of going and getting the kids. The RV caught fire with 3 kids locked inside while they were cooking meth in the house. Instead of going and getting the kids out of the burning RV, they went back into the house and got rid of all the drug paraphernalia, and the 3 kids burned to death. This mother, Lindsay Felder, walks into her living room in Bartlesville, found a dirty blanket, picked it up, put it in the washing machine. Her 13-month-old baby was in it. She was so high on meth, she didn't even know it. And she'd already lost her kids 7 or 8 times. And each time she did, she would just put on a pretty dress, bawl her eyes out before a judge, and she'd get her kids back. Oh, I went to treatment. Yeah, 7 days in treatment. Yeah, 7 days in treatment. She thinks she's a good mother. I'm tired of seeing these dead kids. And like I said, we're dealing with 2nd, 3rd generations. But looking for those odors, don't ignore these signs. I know you don't want to follow the breadcrumb because you're afraid of what you might find, but it could be the odors. I always tell parents, hug your kids when they get home from school. You can smell the marijuana on their clothes. You can smell the alcohol in their breath. It's amazing how quickly you would intervene with a drug addiction sometimes if you would just hug your kids. You can find out what they're into. Get to know who your kids hang out with. What games do they play? What videos do they watch? They're going to gravitate to kids and things that are of interest to them. So if they're already, watching marijuana video games and marijuana posters on their walls, look for the physical changes, mood swings, totally unprovoked, personality changes, school problems that you can't explain, the sites they're visiting. Kids used to be outgoing and now they're not. Kids used to draw real pretty pictures. Now he's drawing a rabbit holding a decapitated head. That was in the notebook of a 13-year-old boy after the police found after he hacked up his parents with a machete. Changes in dress and friends. He went from dressing real nice to now he doesn't care about his hygiene. He used to hang around good kids at church. Now he's already hanging around kids who got drug problems. Guess what your kid's doing? They're telling you what they're into. Don't say you don't know your kid, that they never open up to you. They don't have to open up to you to know exactly what they're like. And this is the most important slide I'm going to leave with you. If there's something we can do to help you all out, please let us know. If you're out there in the field doing anything and you run across something, I'm not asking you to be a snitch and say, hey, Mark, we saw this, go bust him. But if you want to say, hey, we were in this house, I want to be anonymous, but I'm concerned because there's kids in this house and here's what we saw, that absolutely could save some lives. So we've done a lot of this training for DHS workers and others who go into places and absolutely save some kids because they saw the training, they knew what to look for, then they saw it in a house where the kids, and we were able to go in and intercept them. And we're not about stealing kids and taking them away from their parents. We're about separating them long enough for those parents to become parents again and get them treated. But we were putting these kids back in houses with parents who were not ready to be parents. So anything we can do to help you all, please let us know. I'm out of time, and so I'm not going to open up to questions. But again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate. Shoot me an email. You can go to Facebook. Send the Bureau of Narcotics a Facebook message. Those all come to my desk. It's a private message. Thank you all very much for letting me share some of this with y'all today.